stage in front of all of you. So if you need to get the hook, let me know and I'll just throw it over to Deep, because it's really his fault that I'm here in the first place anyway. So thank you all for being here today. This session is focusing in on the OpenData Network and the benefits that you will find within your ecosystem in the applications that you deploy and the group of developers that ultimately will start touching and reaching your data. So we want to dive into that a little bit more today. So OpenData Network. So you heard a little bit about this during the product keynote this morning, but really I want to dive into it so that you understand what the motivation was behind it in the first place. The OpenData Network is really, it really is here to serve a couple of major purposes for you in terms of how you make your data more useful. The first is a mechanism to enable the data to be discoverable, not just by your own organization and your constituency, but also by other organizations that look like yours. So now we're talking about being able to share knowledge, share data, obviously, but also best practices. So you can think of the OpenData Network to some extent as a community that you can use amongst yourselves. The second prong of this is really more about the technology aspects of the OpenData Network. And this is where we start talking about taking the data, putting it together across multiple organizations, and making it infiltrate all the applications and information products that you will be using to get your data all the way out to the organizations, to the people, to the journalists that are trying to use that data and interpret it and make decisions from it. So this is really what we're going to dive into today. And I want to get into it and talk to you conceptually about the three different prongs of the offering. And then I'm going to shut up and let these guys show you what we're talking about. So there's three major components. The first one, and I look at it as three legs of the stool. We really created the OpenData Network, OpenDataNetwork.com, as a place to connect the publishers of this high-value data with one another and to join up the data sources so that you can actually start to explore and visualize and share cross-organization, not just within your organization. And so that first prong, you may already have some familiarity with because many of you are already contributing here, but OpenDataNetwork.com is really the fundamental layer of capability and technology that if you walk away with one thing, walk away with the point that you need to be contributing here. What does this do? It's an online open data catalog that is effectively kind of a multi-tenant solution. It is everybody's data all together with the ability to discover and explore and visualize those combined data sets, the data sets that you're finding that cross different sectors. This is already very well populated. We have thousands and thousands of data sets in here today, and they span multiple different topic areas. So we're covering infrastructure and housing and development and health and education and finance. If you're not already going there to discover data sets that look like yours and to start to look at how you're performing against other like organizations, you should be going there today. And we'll have Deep show us some examples of this. The second leg on the stool. This is about the sets of applications and information products that Socrata brings to you. So you've seen and heard a lot about open performance, about the Socrata for Finance suite of applications. So how does the OpenData Network play there? Because right now you're probably thinking about it mostly as a solution for going in and understanding what's my expenditure on vendor XYZ. What if we were to tell you that you could go into Open Expenditures and not just see how much money you're spending on vendor XYZ, but also how the county next to yours is spending money on that same vendor. You can start to actually benchmark. So what you'll see is over the course of the next several years, in every application that Socrata builds, every information product Socrata builds, this concept of open data network will be infiltrating. You'll be able to see your own data, obviously, but you'll also start to be able to pull aspects of benchmarking into these applications. And we're going to have Michael showcase some of that a little bit later on. Third leg of the stool. This is about the ecosystem of developers that sit around the OpenData Network. So Socrata is a pretty small company. I mean, we're growing quickly, but we understand that we have a limited pool of engineering resources, and we also have a limited set of expertise in terms of the domains that we know and know well. We can't build every application to solve every problem. However, there are 11 million software developers in the world. 3.5 million of them are in this country. These people have a very broad array of talents, of domain expertise, and extra horsepower to build things. And so why on earth would we not want to get the data that's in the OpenData Network into the hands of those developers? So a huge component of what we're offering here is the ability for developers to access everything that has been contributed to the OpenData Network and build applications that ultimately will make your investment in the open data platform much, much more valuable. And we'll spend some time talking about that today. We're talking about applications that you can use in-house to solve internal problems, but we're also talking about syndication of that data out into consumer-facing applications, citizen engagement. It's taking the data all the way out to the place where you or your citizens are trying to make a decision, into the tools that they're already using to make those decisions. So don't take my word for it. Let's actually ask for a demo. Anybody want a demo? Yeah, okay, good. So to kick off the demos today, I've asked our CTO, Deep, to come up and give us a brief demonstration of the Open Data Network and how that works and some of the richness of the data sets that are there. And then also he's going to give us a sneak peek at a new prototype that's actually taking data from the Open Data Network, mashing it up with census data, and allowing us to take different geographic regions and compare and contrast them with one another to be able to start seeing some of those benchmarking. So Deep, I'll hand the reins to you.
Cool. Thanks, Robin. Is everybody alive? Still awake? Cool.
I didn't even get the hook yet.
All right, let's bring up a browser. So I'm going to start off on one node in the Open Data Network, a graph, which is our favorite city, the one we live in, at least a lot of us, Seattle. So imagine I'm a developer, and I come in, and I'm interested in building permits. Of course, because I'm on data.seattle.gov, I'm going to get building permits data from Seattle. But one of the things that we've done is added this little feature right here. Do I have a laser pointer on this guy? Yes. All right. So take a look here. It says, find data like this on the Open Data Network. So one of the things we really want is a lot of participation from all of you so we can help build out that graph that defines the network. So if I click on that, I now get taken off to Open Data Network, and I'm seeing building permit data not just from Seattle, but from LA, Menlo Park, Montgomery County, other places as well. And of course, within the Open Data Network, I can go to the original data set, which will, of course, be on your hosted platforms. I can also go to the domain, which is like a different part of the graph where I can see all of your data. And I can, as a developer, click on the API and see all of the API documentation around that data set. The other thing I can do, so I might realize, and this is a little bit rough still, but I can look at a standard. So for example, we have a BLDS standard that Sarah's going to talk about in a little bit that we've put together with a number of companies. Many of you may have been involved in this process. BLDS is a building and permit standard. We have 16 data sets in so far in that implement the BLDS standard, which is a schema. And we've got a consumption partner in the form of Zillow, for example, that's going to take that data and move it up into the cloud and integrate it into this mass consumer application that we all know of as Zillow. And we'll see other mass consumption partners as well. Now, one thing that Robin didn't mention but should go without saying, that this is all for public data sets that you decide are public. This is not the Open Data Network for private data sets, hence the word open. Just to clarify so nobody's concerned. But basically, now as a developer, I can do a couple things. I can come in via the API itself, and I can find all of the data sets that implement a standard. And then I can go through those data sets, and I can implement an application now that spans city. And as we get more and more participation in the network, we'll have more and more cities implementing and other organizations implementing this particular standard and others. And that developer's application will now have broader reach. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more. As you've heard from Saf's demo out, in the morning keynote, we also have this machine learning process that I spoke about last year, where we go through, we annotate. At that time, it was very much kind of in inception. We annotate data sets, we automatically categorize them into a number of categories. So, for example, if I want to see all of the education data sets that were automatically classified across the Open Data Network right now, I can do so. And if I want to search for something like test results, the search will be constrained to things within that domain. So that's the Open Data Network. There's a few things that you should expect kind of moving forward. So with respect to standards, we're going to start to build more and more of a community around the standards with you all. So you'll see some of those features rolling out over time. So it won't be just about seeing data sets, but it'll also be about seeing other applications that do something with those. With a particular standard, for example. Oftentimes, communities tend to organize around a standard, so all those who care about building permits or care about restaurant inspections tend to organize, so expect some community features over time. So with that, I'm going to jump gears a little bit and talk about a prototypical application that we've been building that is very investigative in nature, but I'm going to be kind of soliciting folks for design partnerships at the end. So think about whether some kind of functionality like this makes sense for you, and we'd like to kind of turn it into and productize it over time. And really, our process is we work with our customers during the actual productization process. But so I'm going to start off looking for my hometown, the great city of Puyallup. So what we've done here is we've started taking multiple data sets from vetted sources, right? So this is US Census data. This also includes the Bureau of Economic Analysis, so highly qualified economics data. We've also started taking in some targeted data to kind of start thinking about more targeted use cases. So for example, we have NACHA, the National Association for Cities and Counties, health data. We've also brought in the RWJF health data. But kind of what we've been focusing on the investigation is can we really do something of interest? And so what you're seeing here is a map that localizes to the city and indicated in blue across a number of variables, right? So we've got variables in different categories. We've got population variables, education, earnings, occupations, GDP, some other ones. In this case, I'm interested in just change in population, right? So I grew up in Puyallup. I was 17. It was a small town. I felt the need to flee and move 2,000 miles away. And so I'm kind of curious, hey, what's going on? Are people, is it a growing active area, or is it sort of population retracting? And so cities in dark blue here indicate, values that are above the upper quartile relative to whatever variable you're looking at, right? So in this particular case, for example, Maple Valley has, really high population change rate of 3.5%. You might not be able to see it. Again, this hasn't gone through our UX team at all. This is developer kind of geek UI, but you'll see up here in the upper right, the actual values. And so I see that, Puyallup, while it doesn't have a great positive population change, but it does have one, and it's above the median. But I also realize that, I actually grew up in South Hill, which is indicated here in red. And you see that it's got a population decline, at least as of 2013. So it's still a prototype where we'll be updating the data. But so that's interesting. The other thing you can see is that we put some of these, so we automatically generate some graphs. So we're looking at census data over time. And so you see a number of years, and you can see the rate of change in population. So I'm going to look at, so we've also built this ability to kind of identify similar regions based on a number of attributes. So for example, if I'm interested in finding out what regions are similar to Puyallup by population, geo, and let's say educational contributions I can do that, and I'll get a number of georegions. So this works for similar states, cities, counties, et cetera. And so now I've got a number of cities I can compare against. And so I can see the population change over time for a number of cities, including South Hill, which is the part that I actually grew up in. So let's say that I'm interested in earnings data. And so now let's localize it a little bit more. So now you can see that Puyallup doesn't do too well in some of the educational breakdowns, but it turns out that there's like a decent amount of folks with a graduate degree that are making a healthy income. And what's different between Puyallup, South Hill, and Lake City? Does anyone know, by the way? Anyone from the Northwest know the difference? This is just a theory, by the way. But the Sounder train runs right into downtown Seattle. And this is my theory, that those folks at the higher income brackets are hopping on the train and going downtown because you can hit Seattle pretty fast. So let's change tacks for a moment. So imagine you work for the city of Portland, right? You've been reading the newspaper, you've been reading up, and you're like watching a couple trends, right? So one of the trends that you notice is that the Bay Area, very expensive, but incredibly economically productive, right? The per capita GDP down in the Bay Area is very impressive. And you also are reading about your big sister city to the north, Seattle, that's been attracting all kinds of companies that are setting up locations inside of Seattle. So you say, gee, I wonder how I stack up. And I wonder if I can get in on some of that action and get some of those companies to come to Portland. And so you start. You add Portland. I should add, by the way, I don't know if I said this, but all these auto-suggests that are doing, that's also in our API now. So any data set, if you have any texty columns, we've got like a new back-end custom service that lets you build in auto-suggest really easily. So let's look at GDP. We've got Portland. Let's, of course, put in the target of our wrath or joy. Oh, sorry. There is a difference between cities and metro regions. And I'm going to put in Seattle. And just for kind of comparison, if I'm working in Portland, I might look at another technology hub that's maybe not quite as hot right now, at least in the news, as Seattle. So I take a look at Denver. And by the way, no offense to anyone from these regions, but we're pretending we're the eyes of Portland. So you see now that the map again, the metro regions have bolded. We're now looking at a very different variable, but again, things in blue are indicating the winners, in essence, of the per capita GDP race. But let's go down here and look at this graph. Can everybody see this graph here? All right. So there's some really interesting points. One is, this is San Jose, and in green here is Portland. And so in essence, this was a real surprise to me. Portland has the same rate of per capita GDP growth over time as San Jose, which is impressive. And there's a couple things to note here. One is the Bureau of Economic Analysis does not actually publish per capita economic rates. So we took the US Census data and we normalized the BEA data. And that's what allowed us to look at per capita, because obviously these cities are of different sizes, and that lets us kind of glean some insights. The other thing we see is that around 2009, Portland surpassed Denver in per capita GDP growth rate, and it looks like it's on target to cross Seattle. And so once we get the latest data in, we will get an answer to the puzzle. But now, as somebody working for Portland, I've got a hypothesis. I'm like, okay. We're doing all right, economically, what can we do to kind of help sell this home? So I look at a really amazing data set, again put out by BEA, called the cost of living, the regional price parity index. And what this does is it takes, so there's a score where 100 is the average kind of cost of living for any given geographical region. And you see here that in purple, indeed, San Jose is significantly higher than all the others, and Portland is significantly lower. So this means, that it costs a lot less in Portland. But where it gets really dramatic here is if you look at the rents. Look at San Jose, it's way up there. And down here at Portland is incredibly cost effective, but this is a really important gap. Like this is the gap between Seattle and Portland, right? And so now all of a sudden you're like, wow, okay, I had this hypothesis. I said I saw some news. There's a lot of sort of stuff in the air. I've now got some data from very vetted, qualified sources. I can go take a look at it. So I'm going to show you just one more quick thing, which is we've got a number of other data sources, and I wanted to look at something that's very different. So let's look at King County, which is my fair county. I'm going to look at health ratings. I love to put in the place that I grew up, so we'll put in Pierce. Right? And so now we're suddenly looking at very different data, right? We're looking at health data, and we see, birth weights, poor mental health days, obesity, a number of things, smoking rates, and all of a sudden, we can jump out on the map. We can look across the U.S. Again, in blue are those, with relatively low smoking rates. Sorry. Again, we haven't yet gone through UX. To be consistent, blue would be good. In this case, red is good, which is bad. But you get the idea. So I'll just kind of wrap up there. So we're looking for a design partner. So if any of you can imagine, so like for example, at the state level, a lot of our states, gather regionally comparable data for counties and cities, as well as other census regions. If you want to be able to compare them or contrast them or like sort of adjust them based on like federal data sets, we want to talk to you. If you're not a state but you have other kind of comparison problems, we also want to talk to you. And finally, it doesn't have to only work on geo-regions. So we're also looking at some other scenarios where instead of comparing on geo-region levels, we're actually comparing on variables. So for example, in the healthcare arena, on disease types, like different diseases. Yeah.
Does this have to be only using this type of federally provided data, or what if, like, I'm working with a hospital association that has like a really nice claims data set?
Yeah. So the RWJF data that's put out by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in conjunction with University of Wisconsin. The only sort of requirement in the current incarnation is that the regions that you have data for come down to something that we can map to U.S. Census regions, right? So states, counties, cities,
Sure.
post zip codes, that kind of thing.
Can that just be something with location attached to it, and then we map it to the census regions? Or does it have to actually have that in the data?
We'll figure out a mapping,
Feasible.
right? We can map
Feasible.
Yeah. Cool. So if anyone's interested, we're going to meet up in the Polaris room kind of after this. So if you want to talk about kind of joining the design partnership, come find me or come by. Cool.
Excellent.
Let me get you back to this.
We don't need slides because Michael's up next. So Michael's going to talk to us about the Open Expenditure application, which I know a lot of you are familiar with. And he's just going to show you how open data is starting to actually percolate into the applications that we're delivering, so you can get an example of what you should be seeing to come.
Yeah, thank you. So, I know that some of you are quite familiar with the Socrata for Finance application, so I'll just give like a really quick overview of the one that you're looking at here. So one of our Socrata for Finance apps is Open Expenditures. It's really focused on getting the details of the checkbook, right? The line item transactions, who's getting paid, how much are they getting paid, into an experience that's easy to access for a wide variety of users. Like you don't have to be a finance wonk to be able to understand it. It's a product that we sell. We're here looking at Connecticut's site. This morning you saw Iowa's site in Saf's keynote, and we have like several dozen more. And one really cool thing, as we've amassed more and more customers bringing in their expenditure data, is that we're now able to actually bring insights that our customers alone would not have, right? Because we have all this information on our system, we can look across our entire corpus of data and see insight that we wouldn't otherwise have. So one of the key things in this application is around the vendor, the who's getting paid aspect. And if I just open up this card here for Connecticut, I was looking at this earlier today, First Transit Inc. So here, let me just flip it to all yours just to give a wealth of information here. So here we're looking at Connecticut spend, over all the years that they've provided this information, going back to 2012. They spent $581 million. Let me zoom this just a little bit to make it easier for you guys in the back. And then, I can go in here, I can see all the individual line item transactions that Connecticut has had, when those, those dates occurred, how much they were for, et cetera. And I get a good deal of insight here. Now, if I was someone that, was looking at Connecticut and was thinking maybe, hey, I want to maybe provide them, like I'm a competitor to First Transit, I want to look at providing services and, want to understand who my competitors look like. Or if I'm the state of Connecticut and I'm thinking I wonder if other states are maybe getting a better deal, maybe there's a purchase contract we can leverage, we help you with that. And so when I scroll down here, I can see here are some other agencies on Socrata that are using First Transit, and so here I've got two cities that use it, right? So if I said, oh, LA seems to do quite a bit of business with them, I want to kind of understand what the profile is when going across to a different part of the country. I can click on this and immediately go across and see, well, here's LA spend. I can see their transactions. I can see some of their amounts, et cetera. To pick one other example, just to show a little bit more of a variety here, I'll look up Airgas, which handles basically gases and transportation type things. So here I've got a considerably larger number of things, and I just want to point out that some of the work that we do here. So you'll notice that every one of these agencies spells it a little bit differently. Airgas USA LLC, Airgas Safety Inc. And sometimes these are different divisions. Sometimes it's the same thing with that just different agencies have just typed them into the system in different formats. Sometimes there's punctuation, sometimes there's misspellings. And we actually have in our back end, we utilize some basic technologies here to help associate items that are similar in order for our customers to have good matches across the open data network. So it's not literally just has to be expelled exactly the right and all the conditions have to line up exactly. We do quite a bit of work here to do that. So this is a case where we're using the power of Socrata's data in order to give customers a unique cut of information that they otherwise wouldn't have.
Great, thanks, Michael. So there's one more element that we need to cover today, and that is how do you actually get your data so that it can be usable in all these different types of applications. And I've asked Sarah to come and talk to us today a little bit about some of the efforts that we're making around data standardization and why it should matter to you. So take it away, Sarah.
So we speak frequently about how open data is a hot mic. Open data is a public utility. Everybody hear me okay? A little bit of echo? All right, then. We talk about how it's a public utility, but what I'm going to speak to you a bit today is about how any utility needs a common outlet. And so I'm going to be speaking a bit about open data standards and how Socrata is supporting those open data standards in our work and in coordination with our government partners. So I'm going to take you back 120 years to a new public utility, electricity. Now, believe it or not, it has many parallels to where we're at right now with open data. As electrical grids emerged in the United States 120 years ago, between the late 1880s and the 19-teens, we saw only one way to access electrical power. It's because, in the end, those distributing it only saw one use for it, which was lighting. And that's fantastic. We lit our homes, our businesses, our governments, our communities. But it meant that if you wanted to use electricity, you needed to plug in to a light outlet. And this meant that as inventors, what we would maybe call today hackers, started creating appliances. What happened was everyone had to plug into a light outlet. You had to take your bulb out and plug your 30-pound red-hot iron in and hang it from the center of your dining room. This does not seem practical, and yet it was what people needed to do. So as more and more products came online to use the electricity powering our communities, inventors started to get clever with what to do about improving the electrical outlet. Similarly, I think as we've developed all of this open data, governments originally created these data repositories and their internal databases based on their relationships with vendors and their internal needs. So we had really almost a closed loop for this data, just like lighting, electricity was going to lighting. But as we've discovered new opportunities, uses, and public use for this data, we need new ways to plug in. Back to 1914, about 100 years ago. So inventors started creating new electrical outlets. And across this nation and around the world, we were seeing dozens, if not hundreds of different types of electrical outlets emerge, and of course, patents on all of those. So if you moved houses, there was a good chance you would have to buy all new appliances, or you would have to right away for the right converter for your new home. I think right now, our developer communities, even our governments, when we're doing multilateral or intergovernmental data sharing, when you're working to meet compliance with your peers or your funders, this is a big challenge to share data. And so we've kind of hacked our way through. It took about 50 years to get standards around the world. But again, governments were developing these standards in silos. So if you are a world traveler, you travel with a converter, right? Today, our appliances, our apps, our websites, our online technologies, they are the lifeblood of how we do business and run our lives. And yet, again and again, we are finding ourselves as those who consume public data, kind of plugging in our irons, so to speak, into light outlets. So Socrata has recognized this challenge, and we've been working with governments to launch data standards and work in a collaborative community around two key areas, housing and public health, particularly restaurant inspection. And I'll talk about two open data standards we've worked on. And I would just like to pause for a minute and say that this poor housing development neither meets some food code rules and has probably some critical violations, and clearly doesn't meet building permitting codes, seeing that it's made out of gingerbread. Thank you for laughing at that. So our first standard that we'll talk about, we've recently hit on with deep, is BLDS, or sometimes called BUILDS. Now, this was a community of civic tech companies that came together, and also users of building data, like Zillow, like Redfin, all of these kind of community members here. And really, the data standard is targeted at cities and counties that do inspections and permitting around construction. It's a flexible standard, so you don't have to meet too many criteria to be able to launch your permitting data and your construction data in BLDS, which is great. And we have 15 municipalities who have launched in the ODN. Finally, we have a partner in Zillow. This is a preview of what we'll launch with Zillow, where you'll be able to see building permits within property information on Zillow. And I think that this is a great value that Socrata brings forward in our partnerships, allowing your data to get to places your citizens are making decisions. Lives. As public health data advisor at Socrata, this has been my pleasure to work on. Lives is the local inspector value entry system developed by San Francisco, Yelp, and Code for America to produce restaurant inspections from in a standard data format, which doesn't change your internal inspection process or even your scoring. A jurisdiction doesn't even need to have scores to take advantage of Lives. And 8 governments piloted over 2 years, surfacing their data as Lives and into Yelp, bringing that information to where their citizens are at. They received positive feedback, and there's a potential to mirror some of the stats we see around posted restaurant inspection scores. Posted scores can lower foodborne illness rates by as much as 30% in the case of Toronto within 2 years. So we're partnering with academics and researchers to see if launching Lives data, 400 jurisdictions from across several Socrata customers, will move the needle on foodborne illness rates. Since 1 in 6 Americans gets foodborne illness every year, I think that this is a very valuable piece of work. And Yelp is ingesting this data from all of our customers that have launched Lives and have restaurant inspection scores. They currently have that data in their health inspection here, as you can see, and then a citizen can click through to drill down into the violations. And we've used a relationship with Yelp to both improve the data standard and improve the presentation of this data. So both critical and non-critical violations are shown instead of just general violations that are shown here currently. And to quickly wrap up, standards increase use and confidence. Yelp surfaces restaurant inspection data because in the standard format, it's easier for them to have confidence that they are matching your restaurant inspection scores to the appropriate restaurants. And it also, I think, produces internal confidence in data because you are going through this process, reviewing the formatting of your information, and you're making sure that you're sharing alongside your peers with documentation and a standard that's easy to interpret. And then we have 3 tips for launching successful data standards. First, don't worry about the standard too much. Just launch your existing data in an API. Second, map your data to a schema. It's really just playing the match game on an Excel spreadsheet. Get that over to us, and then contact customer success or your closest relationship at Socrata, and talk with them about setting up lives or BLDS for your own government. And even if you're a state or a federal agency, there are multiple ways that you could be using this data as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. So this is what we all want. We want improved quality of life. We want improved economic development. We want better operational efficiency of our governments. And one of the key ways to get there is by participating not just in your own publication of open data, but contributing into the Open Data Network so that you can start to see the benefits that we have showcased for you here today. So I'd like to encourage you all to consider contributing some, if not all, of your open data into the Open Data Network, and ask us about it if you need tips on how. Thank you.
Before everybody dashes, I have a few announcements. From our great administrative people around here. First, you should turn in your passports at the registration desk before you leave today so that you can be entered into the raffle. Reminder to vote for the lightning talks. So go on to the app and make sure that you rank with stars all of your favorite lightning talks. I had mentioned earlier, but I'd like to pitch again, Data Camp tomorrow at the W Hotel. It is going to be a great day to put all of this inspiration and ideas into action. And then finally, and most importantly, the alcohol piece. There is a happy hour tonight at 5:30. Everybody just wants to know about the alcohol is really what we got to. That's why I saved it for last. So we have some more sessions in the amphitheater for the next hour and a half or so, and then there is a happy hour in right outside the amphitheater at 5:30. See everyone there. It's break time, so if you would like to take some